Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, with our Facebook Live here, weekly update report for you, talking about Judicial Watch's anti-corruption transparency activities designed to keep this government here in Washington, D.C. to account. A lot to talk about. We have new news on a grand jury looking into the Clinton email matter, or one that was impaneled last year to do that. Some astonishing news there. Also, a lot in the news this week and the last few weeks about President Trump's travel to Mar-a-Lago and the cost of that travel, and Judicial Watch has been in the center of that story, so I want to give you my thoughts on that. And then thirdly, we've got a sanctuary city crisis that still needs to be addressed. We had a court ruling that tried to rein in President Trump's ability to enforce the rule of law, and I'll give you details on that and let you know what Judicial Watch is doing to enforce the rule of law on sanctuary cities. A lot of big news this week in the Clinton email front, believe it or not. That scandal is not over. I don't even think all the criminal investigations into Hillary Clinton have been closed. If you've seen that they've been closed, let me know. But I know there have been reports that there have been ongoing criminal investigations at the end of the year. None of them have been closed, including whether or not she lied to Congress. There's supposedly the FBI was looking at the Clinton Foundation. That hasn't been closed. And frankly, they need to reopen the classified the mishandling classified information, the investigation into that. But we had been in a fight with the Trump administration. Frankly, it was the Obama administration, but now the fight is with the Trump administration over whether or not the State Department, based on the fact that Hillary Clinton took these records with her, was supposed to do what the law requires, which is to send a notice or a letter or some communication to the Justice Department in an effort to recover these records. Now, you might imagine the Obama State Department didn't want to do that. The lower court upheld their decision not to do that. We took it up on appeal. The appellate court said, no, unless you can tell us there's nothing possible else that the Justice Department can't do to recover these emails, you got to go ahead with this. And so it was kicked back down to the district court again. And we're still in court now, and the Trump administration doesn't want to send this letter. So we got the Trump State Department, which I know is run by mostly appointees of President Obama or the bureaucrats that are antagonistic to President Trump on a direct level and certainly protective of the State Department's bureaucratic interests. They still don't want to do this, and they're fighting us in court. And as part of that fight, they were trying to file something this week telling the court, hey, look, we've got this record here, this declaration from the FBI saying that we've done everything that we can do or reasonably can do to get her records. So what was interesting is what the declaration said. And the declaration was filed filed by FBI Special Agent E.W. Pristap. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's Priestap. And he was the FBI Assistant Director assigned to counterintelligence and counter-espionage matters, who was charged with investigating the Clinton email issue. And what did he say in his declaration? All sorts of things. But most newsworthy is that they issued a subpoena, a grand jury subpoena, for certain of Hillary Clinton's email records. So this is the first news and the first confirmation that there was a grand jury convened to investigate Hillary Clinton's emails. What I'd like to know is why we're only learning about it now. Certainly if we had known about it last year, our public discussion about what Mrs. Clinton was up to would have been very different. And there was a story in the New York Times, I think it was on Sunday or last weekend, talking about this basically a CYA piece for FBI Director James Comey, talking about how the Justice Department pressured the FBI to not use the word investigation with the Clinton email matter. And I wonder, and of course that was misleading because there was an investigation. In fact, there was a grand jury of some type that had been convened. But obviously for political reasons, they want to minimize the nature of the criminal investigation or severity of it into Mrs. Clinton. And so it's, again, Judicial Watch that's exposing this. And again, also problematic is we've got the FBI and the State Department and the Justice Department, nominally run by the President of the United States, Donald Trump, working to protect Hillary Clinton still. Isn't that remarkable? So if you want to know how the deep state operates and how the agencies operate even when there's a change in president, this is a perfect example. We've got these agencies appearing in federal court trying to prevent a darn letter from being sent to the Justice Department that might require further action to get all the emails that we're due under the law. We're not asking for her, quote, personal emails. We're asking for the records that are subject to disclosure under the Federal Freedom of Information Act. And we're still being fought by that from this State Department, from this Justice Department, and from this FBI. But in order to do this, they're using and disclosing more information, which is interesting to see. And I encourage you to go to our website at judicialwatch.org and read not only the press release, obviously, but the actual FBI document that was filed with the court filing by the government this week, because it really shows you how the investigation was half-baked. I think it confirms, or I guess there have been earlier reports that they had 13 devices Hillary Clinton had that they couldn't basically get access to. They were also relying on Hillary Clinton's lawyers to look through some of these devices and emails and relying on their promises as to what documents should have been responsive or not. And you may recall when they were giving immunity out to a bunch of people, they were saying, well, you know, that was the best way to get testimony. Well, in fact, they had a grand jury. That's an even better way to get testimony, or at least the threat of coming before grand juries is an even better way to get testimony, not these ridiculous immunity agreements that have been so widely criticized on pretty much anyone who knows anything about federal criminal prosecutions. So again, there's more meat here on the Clinton email issue. We are still fighting to get accountability on it. The coast is not clear for her on this issue at all legally. And certainly we want the agencies to do what they need to do under the law. And once again, President Trump really needs to clean house, either directly or indirectly at these agencies, because they are just fighting us and they're still in the tank for Hillary Clinton. So real concern about what we're dealing with here. And it's one thing to fight the Obama administration on Hillary Clinton's emails. I tell you, it's disappointing to fight the Obama administration, the Trump administration on this as well. We have also on a note related to people trying to keep emails about government activity away from the American people. We have a federal court hearing on Monday over Obama DHS Secretary Jay Johnson, who was using his personal email account to conduct government business. We asked for the emails from that account. We still haven't gotten them because the government objected to searching them. And you know, there's a story that's worth telling again, because we exposed how the fact that even though the DHS security people told people don't use your Yahoo, Gmail accounts and whatever, because they're unsecure and they're causing us lots of security issues. So if you're on your government computer, you can't access your personal email accounts. Well, they issued this agency-wide directive at the Department of Homeland Security, and they immediately started giving waivers to the top people, including the secretary, who just said, well, I wanted to keep on using my emails personally. So they gave him a waiver first day. And his other top people were given waivers as well. And we've been fighting tooth and nail to get access to the government records on those personal private email accounts. And we're still facing fight and blowback and pushback from the agency. And again, the more things change, the more they remain the same on government transparency issues. And I'm hopeful that the president will get more appointees in and he'll be able to focus on these transparency issues. But in the meantime, this government corruption continues. And I would suggest to him he spend more time focusing on corruption issues. You know, these policy issues are important. You know, we want our taxes cut. We want Obamacare repealed, even though evidently that's not going to happen. But those things are going to go along in Congress and such. But as president, he's got this unique opportunity and responsibility, I would say, in light of his campaign, to really clean house. And I suspect he wants to do that, and I'm hoping that Judicial Watch is able to educate the administration on this through its public efforts, and sometimes by suing the administration to focus their attention on the fact they need to expose what went on during the Obama administration and be accountable to the American people. Along those lines, the media loves this story, which is the Trump travel story. Now, Judicial Watch has been in the center of this story because it was Judicial Watch, not Obama's fans in the media, that were tracking the costs of President Obama's travels. And we generally tracked his unnecessary luxury travel. So if he was going to Hawaii or if he was going cross-country to go golfing, we track the cost of that travel. And we get the cost of what it took to bring Air Force One, use Air Force One, and then the incidental cost for the Secret Service, which would be, air flight, airplanes, rental cars, and hotel bills and meals and such. And so the total was $97 million. So now President Trump, to the surprise of pretty much everybody, has been traveling to Mar-a-Lago pretty regularly. And so people want to know, what are you doing about this, Judicial Watch? What's your view on this, and what about the costs? And of course, the media is very intensely interested in what Trump's travel costs are. We didn't have this sort of attention when we were doing all this work by ourselves with Obama's travel. But we're consistent, and we are tracking Trump's travel. They haven't given us any of the numbers yet. In fact, we're still waiting for Obama numbers, to be fair. So we still don't have any of the numbers. So just so you know, it costs the president, it costs taxpayers about $1 million to send him down to Mar-a-Lago. So Air Force One is $142,000 an hour. So that we know for sure. And based on prior Secret Service trips or Obama trips to Florida for weekends and such, we estimate, and we're just estimating because the Secret Service hasn't given us the numbers, that it costs about $250,000 for President Trump to get Secret Service protection down there. So that's about $1 million a trip. Now, the media has been bandying about this number of $3.6 million a trip. And without getting into detail, that number's not right. But it's about $1 million. But we still don't know what the numbers are actually because we haven't gotten any responses from the agencies, the Air Force and the Secret Service. The Air Force usually gives the records eventually. The Secret Service has been kind of a disaster for reasons you might imagine. So we're still waiting for those numbers. We are prepared to go to court. We may go to court soon to get them. But just so you know, it's about $1 million a year, a trip to get him down to Mar-a-Lago. And obviously, if he goes there as often as he is, or if he travels elsewhere on weekends to his other properties in New Jersey and such, those numbers are going to get pretty high pretty quickly. And so it's always going to be an issue for him, and he should think of ways to save the taxpayer money. If he's going to do that, he's got to recognize the cost taxpayers are incurred. You know, we're very critical of President Obama over his unnecessary travel. And President Trump was too when he was a candidate. So we got to call them as we see them, and we just hope the president's more sensitive to the cost of presidential travel, and we want the numbers so people know what we're talking about. And we can debate it. At least he is working, it looks to me, by and large in Mar-a-Lago, and that's to his credit. And the media wants to have their cake and eat it too, where they complain that he's doing all this work in Mar-a-Lago when he should be doing it at the White House, and then he's complaining about he's in Mar-a-Lago, where he's actually working. So, he's going to keep on doing this, and if he keeps on doing it, it's going to just be a little bit of a political problem for him. And I hope it's not a transparency problem for him and they start disclosing the numbers so at least we all know what numbers we're talking about, because the media, you can't trust to give you the correct numbers without coming to us first. And I'll give you an example about the media interest in this. I get calls probably 3 times a week on the cost of Trump's travel. We didn't have that type of coverage when we were tracking President Obama's travel, his outrageous Hawaiian vacations, sending his spouse to the southern coast of Spain for a vacation. It's just complete waste of money. So these are the sorts of numbers we're going to be asking for from the Trump administration. But I've been interviewed by every major network on this topic. The big 3 networks. That didn't happen. I don't even think it happened for the Clinton email scandal, which we were the reason it was exposed. So the president is going to have a problem with the media that hates him, and he can mitigate his problems by, again, finding other costs to cut for the cost of the presidency, because it's my view this presidency is too big. I don't care if it's President Trump in office, President Obama, Bush, Clinton, no matter who, the presidency is too big. And the retinue that travels with the president, You know, Air Force One, do we need it to be as expensive as we need it to, as it is? President Trump has criticized that to his credit, and he may be taking steps to save us money there. But he's got to be, as a public official, aware of the cost taxpayers incur when he travels. It doesn't mean he doesn't, but there should be good business reasons for traveling. And sometimes those good business reasons are to go on a vacation now and again. There's nothing wrong with that. He's the president. But if he's doing it every other weekend at Mar-a-Lago, even if they are working vacations, it's going to be an issue for him, and we're going to be tracking it. We're not going to stop just because we might think he's doing good things in other areas. Along those lines, President Trump gets a real check plus mark, whatever A++, whatever you want to call it, on enforcing the rule of law on immigration. And you know, despite these court decisions, including a recent one out of California that pared back or suspended, I don't even know what it did, since I don't think the order has been enforced yet, the ability of the Justice Department to cut off the funds of sanctuary cities that are thwarting and disobeying federal law, violating federal law. You had a liberal judge out there who evidently doesn't like Donald Trump. He's a big Obama. He was a political appointee, judicial appointee of President Obama, but an unusual one in that he was a big campaign contributor, and most Republicans opposed his ascension to the district court. And it's kind of hard to get the attention of Republicans for district court nominees in the Obama administration. So the district court nominees are the, you know, that's when you think of federal court judge, that's typically the first line of judges you think about. You know, most Republicans let them go by, but this one barely went by because of his activist and political giving history. I guess there was a lack of trust that he would be a disinterested jurist. Well, you know, this decision seems to indicate it too, that this anti-Trump animus is leading to judges making the wrong rulings. It's one thing to misapply the law on a good faith basis, but you know, if you don't like Donald Trump and you're going to rule against him no matter what, boy, that undermines the rule of law, and those judges deserve a lot of criticism and scrutiny for their decisions that are really out there in left field legally. But the good news is, you know, sanctuary cities are still on notice. I don't see anything in this decision that would prevent the law from being enforced against them in other ways, including cutting off funding specifically. So it may be much ado about nothing other than, you know, a federal court judge trying to make President Trump look bad. But secondly, we've got these numbers out of the border where you've got tremendous drops in immigrant crossings. Not legal immigrants, but illegal immigrant crossings. I think it's dropped 70%. So that is just great news. And of course, you've got ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement, doing much more enforcement. So we've got finally president and his appointees who are committed to enforcing the rule of law, and they're going to start deporting people and starting protecting the border. Now, I know there's been news in this week about whether the border wall is going to be funded or not, but you know, that's typical. That's the typical establishment response to enforcement of our nation's immigration laws, which is to oppose it. So it's not surprising that President Trump is having trouble getting his border wall enforced. But in the meantime, there's a good wall metaphorically going on, being built down there in terms of law enforcement, and folks are getting the message that you can't come across the border illegally, and we are benefiting from that. The public safety will benefit from that, and the rule of law will benefit from that. There are other things he needs to do, and we aim to help him do those things and encourage him to do those things. But if he can't get certain things done, then Judicial Watch again is going to step into the breach. And we've already been in the breach on battling sanctuary cities. We've been battling the sanctuary cities for years, suing them in federal court, warning them when they're outside the rule of law, getting them to change policies. We're suing them in state court in San Francisco in Northern California over San Francisco's, their sheriff's department's illicit sanctuary policy. So whether or not they can get all the enforcement they want at the federal level against these sanctuary cities, Judicial Watch has its own litigation designed to get accountability and to end the sanctuary policies as well. So it's important to have independent voices like Judicial Watch taking legal action separate and apart from any government agency to enforce the rule of law. We were doing that before the Trump administration came into power. Obviously, during the Obama administration, things were in a real crisis state. But as I've been talking about in this report, the Trump administration in many ways hasn't come to power and is being thwarted by the federal courts inappropriately at times. But we've got these other cases going forward that can help get the rule of law enforced in a way that maybe even the Justice Department and Congress and the President can't do. So that's the great thing about Judicial Watch. We do things that Congress and the media and sometimes even the Justice Department can't or is unable to do. So with that, thanks for joining us this week. A lot to talk about. Be sure, again, to support our great work here at Judicial Watch. You know what to do, and those of you who are supporting us already, you know the great work that we're able to accomplish as a result of your contributions. We all do this. We're a nonprofit, and so we can't do any of the work without the support of Americans, and we don't get government money like George Soros does. So I hope you support our work, and I'll be here next week. Thank you.